we know that the old self has been outgrown. And so we seek an expanded horizon. And we do not get to just walk into it without being changed.
Welcome to Soror Mystica, a podcast exploring life's mysteries and magic through its symbols.
I'm Mariana Lewis, an archetypal tarotist.
And I'm astrologer Cristina Farella.
And just as the Soror Mystica guided the alchemist through his holy work, we hope to be your mystic sisters in these conversations, guiding you deeper into the symbolic life. Capturing Yinz LLC is a nature-based business that creates art and home fragrances for your life, bringing all things back to nature. Charlotte also offers sessions virtually for tarot, Reiki, and candle magic, as well as in-person classes in Pittsburgh, PA, if you happen to be in that area. You can find her at capturingyinz.com or on Instagram at capturing_Yinz. That's YINZ. I went and checked out Charlotte's website. It is so amazing. There's so many extraordinary offerings, and I'm very excited to go explore more, and you should too. Go check out capturingyinz.com.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 28th episode of Soror Mystica. We are here today to talk to you about the symbol of the threshold. And before we do that, I'm going to just let you all know that on February 4th, I'm going to be offering a brand new class called Prophetic Asteroids. And I'm very excited to open this up. I've never taught this class before, but I had this idea while I was feeling very inspired about witches and labyrinth mythology last year. And so Prophetic Asteroids is a 3-part exploration of different myths centered around prophetic figures. So the whole point of this is to kind of learn the stories of prophetic figures like Circe, Medea, Cassandra, the oracles of Apollo, and also Orpheus. And then after we learn those stories, look for their asteroid placements in our own natal charts to figure out our own unique orientation to the prophetic. And so it's kind of like half mythology learning, half creative approach to astrology through asteroid work. And I'm absolutely delighted to be able to offer this. So you can find all the information about this in our little show notes below, or if you go over to my website, which is just CristinaFarella.com, or my link tree on Instagram also has the link up. You'll find all the details, but it's great. I usually teach during the week, but I'm going to be teaching on Sundays, which is going to feel like a cozy kind of like weekly
I love
reset.
teaching on Sundays.
Yeah, I've never done it before. So it's going to be a fun sort of investigation and definitely packed full of info. But I want this to feel more like a gentle, creative storytelling, reflection, prompting thing, more so than straight ahead astro teaching. So anyway, join me. It'd be great.
It sounds like it's going to be so good.
Okay, so we always like to talk about what we're reading. And I also want to throw in, we just were able to talk about what we were reading with a whole group of people in our Cloister book club, our
That was
inaugural.
so good.
Yes, that was so fun. And we're going to be meeting, I think, on a 6-week basis. So for our first session, if you're listening to this and you're like, what are you guys talking about? We have a private member community. And one of the perks of this is a book club that meets on a bi-monthly basis. It's brand new. Yeah. So our first book that we read was Jung's Undiscovered Self. And we just met and had a really lovely, kind of easy breezy, but rich conversation. With,
it was a really juicy conversation. Yeah. So many people had such powerful and interesting things to say. We talked about the shadow, and we talked about the internet and social media. And it was really cool. And it was so cool to actually chat with people who have such interesting, thoughtful perspectives on things, and to just, someone even watched it later. We recorded it for the other members who couldn't come live, and they watched it later and they were like, this was really good. It really helped me understand it, which was such a nice comment to see. So
It's wonderful. We're very lucky that I think, we just are lucky that our listeners are who they are. And, we're all just like people who are interested in these strange topics. So it was
Yep.
really cool to get together and be, people on the internet
Yep.
and make friends and introduce ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and get to know each other a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway,
And we
if
just
you're
picked out
interested in
our
that,
next book,
mhm,
which we'll announce to the community. I don't know if we'll announce it right now, but we just picked it out. So now is the perfect time to join and see what we're reading and read
mhm,
with us. So,
yep. And you can find all those links too below. So that's there.
mm-hmm.
Okay, so now I'm going to tell you what I'm reading. I am reading multiple things at once, but the thing that I read most recently was or is a book called Trickster Makes the World, and it's by
Mm-hmm.
Lewis Hyde.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a book that really just focuses on trickster mythology in art motifs. And so it starts on this really awesome opening exploration of like the coyote in Native American myth, and
That's so cool.
goes into Mercury and Hermes in the Greco-Roman myths, and it's going to keep kind of, just showing the trickster in all of his different forms. So if you're looking for some Mercury literature, that is really cool. And then I'm also reading a book of short stories by Silvina Ocampo,
Mm-hmm.
and it's called Thus Were Their Faces. And
Mm.
she's kind of like a surrealist feminist horror vibe. If you like Leonora Carrington's short stories, which are excellent, they're kind of similar, but a little bit less naive, but they're still kind of naive. Anyway, highly recommend. She's
That
out.
sounds good.
So
Sounds really
yeah,
juicy and good.
what are you working on?
I am reading a lot too. I am currently reading A Walk Through the Forest of Souls by Rachel Pollack. And if you don't know Rachel Pollack, she is like one of the foremost tarot scholars of the certainly the 21st century. I would say like the new age of tarot, which started like 1990 ish, which
Mm-hmm.
is like the kind of resurgence of it in a scholarship focused way. And she passed away this year, which is very, very sad. And this was
Mm-hmm.
her final book. And it's kind of wacky and really interesting because it's not, her very famous book is 78 Degrees of Wisdom, which is the like, ultimate tarot handbook. But this one is like just whatever she wants to talk about or think about with the tarot. So there's like readings that she did asking like, what does God want for the world? Who is God? I'm like, whoa, this is so weird,
So
and really
funny.
delightful. And then there's also just some of those just incredible insights she has about being a tarot reader and reading tarot, what it can do for your life and how to think about it. And it's
Mm-hmm.
really good. Um, and I'm also reading The Madonna Secret by
Mm-hmm.
Sophie Strand, which is quite a delight as well. It's a massive book. It's like 700 pages, something like that. I'm
Are
about
you
halfway
serious? I did
through.
not know that. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it's really,
Wow.
really big.
Wow.
And what's so delightful about it is that for listeners who've been here a while, you may have know that I'm like kind of obsessed with Mary Magdalene and the story of Mary Magdalene. And this book is like basically a it's like a fantasy of what this kind of alternate history would have looked like between Mary Magdalene and Jesus. And so I finally got to the point in the book where it's starting to get sexy, which is fun.
You and your Jesus fetish
My
is
Jesus
extremely
fetish.
cute.
Anyway, it is very much fulfilling this like just delightful fantasy I have of imagining Jesus marrying Mary Magdalene and loving her and them being like the power couple of all power couples. So it's fun. It's like completely just a little joy,
That's great.
and
I love it.
wonderful.
Love this for
So,
you.
yes, thank
Mm-hmm.
you. Moving on to thresholds and talking about thresholds, we have your book, your beautiful symbols
Mm-hmm.
book,
Mm-hmm.
that I'm sure has some very, very interesting things to say about thresholds.
Yeah. So basically, I'll read from this, but I'll also just say up front, we're taping this on the day of the Pluto Cazimi and
Right,
the eventual Pluto ingress into Aquarius. And if
right.
you're not an astrology person, what that means is Pluto, the planet of death and transformation and rebirth and alchemy and lots of other things, is meeting up with the sun and is illuminated. And this is important because this happens once a year in Capricorn, and it's been happening once a year since 2008. But this is the last time that this is ever going to happen in our lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big deal. Subsequent Pluto Sun conjunctions will happen in Aquarius, and then when we're really old, it'll happen in Pisces. And so we're just leaving this Capricorn era behind. And Pluto is going to also enter Aquarius later today. So it's just a threshold moment, basically,
Yeah.
that we're perched on as we, timed. We didn't plan this on purpose. We kind of I feel like I
Pluto
lost steam
did.
last week. Yeah. Pluto planned this. We
Yeah.
usually, we try to just flow with things, and it just worked out that this is what we were going to do on this very day. So
Mm-hmm.
that feels like a little synchronicity.
Yes.
And we'll talk about the astrology of thresholds a lot. I want to talk about that. But anyway, first and foremost, I love to read from my Encyclopedia of Traditional Symbols. So the entry for threshold says, passage from the profane to the sacred, from outer profane space to inner sacred space, entering a new world. As a boundary symbol, it is the line of meeting of the natural and supernatural. This is ritually defined in the ceremony of beating the bounds, redefining the realm of space in the same manner in which New Year ceremonies redefine time. Sinking in water or entering a dark forest or a door in a wall are threshold symbols, as entering the perilous unknown. Vestal goddesses of virginity are goddesses of the threshold, guardians of the threshold who must be overcome before the sacred realm can be entered are dragons, serpents, monsters, dogs, scorpion men, and lions. In the psychic and spiritual realm, guardians prevent man from going too far or too fast and meeting or seeing more than he is capable of bearing in occult or esoteric knowledge. So
Wow.
that's an awesome entry.
Yeah, that was a good
Sometimes,
one.
yeah, sometimes they're very long and just too many things, but this is such a succinct and interesting place. So I love all of this, and I love the emergence of nature imagery.
Yeah.
That's kind of coming in, these ideas of the forests or sinking in water. We in this show we analyze dreams often, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of water symbolism comes up
Yeah.
as a kind of liminal image. So yeah, here we are. I think that this is a really great place to start. And the idea of the passage from the profane to the sacred is, I
Yeah.
think, at bottom, probably one of the most important things about the threshold. We're moving from a place of the mundane to something divine, or lack of
Yeah.
knowledge to enlightenment or realization. So
Yeah.
yeah, this is what we're opening with now.
Whenever we see the passage of threshold in myth, that's pretty much always what we see, the movement into the supernatural world. It's never just like, or rarely is it just, we move from one town to the next town. It's always we moved from where we are, where we've began, into the supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
We can think of like the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe being kind of like the quintessential visual of the crossing into the threshold, where they open the
Mm-hmm.
doors and they step through, and now they're in a magical world. So I really do like that kind of beginning with that idea of the crossing from the profane into the sacred.
How sad were you as a kid when you found no secret passageways in the closets of your house?
Extremely. I was convinced that must be in my grandparents' house. It's like, it's
Mm-hmm.
here somewhere. It's gotta
Mm-hmm.
be. They have so many weird closets and rooms. I'll find
Yeah.
it. Never
In
found
the
it.
Narnia series, in the very first book, which is my favorite of the series, it's called The Magician's Nephew. And
Mm-hmm.
literally the nephew of the magician who entered into Narnia for the first time, or whatever Narnia became,
Mm-hmm.
is like this old kind of grandfatherly figure. And he has a kind of portal from his attic. And so it's funny how we orient the one who knows about the threshold passage with the elder. I think that that's a kind
Oh
of
yeah, the old
curious.
wise man. Certainly, that's
Mm-hmm.
where he knows where it is. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the old
Exactly.
wise man. I think is one of the most beautiful kind of reflections I've seen about it. Which Jung kind of said it, but I feel like I've cobbled it together from a lot of different sources. Is that it is the it's almost like the future self that has already passed through the journey and then somehow kind of gets transported back to
Oh, that's
the beginning
beautiful.
again. And so it's like the self as guide, which is already realized. And kind of like this backwards motion to initiate ourselves
That's
into
so
the journey.
exciting. I
Isn't
love
that
that
a really
idea.
pretty?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that idea of it too. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that with the threshold, that's also all of that you read in the book reminds me of so much of what Joseph Campbell said about the threshold. And that was really my first encounter with thinking about thresholds in a really thoughtful way, is by reading The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. People are probably pretty familiar with the idea of his hero's journey. That is his seminal work. And it is the basic concept is that in all of these myths and all of these stories, there is this repetition of the same passages that we go through, the same thing. We start at the beginning where everything is normal to us, and somehow we end transfigured, and we have to go through these particular points, these story points to get there. And it really is an amazing thing that he recognized there, because it's just true. We always start at the beginning where everything is fine, cross that first threshold where we then enter the supernatural. Then we have to confront something. We have to battle with something. We have to see some kind of villain. We have to go through some kind of trial. And then somehow we have to make our way back. And that's just as hard. And that's the other side of the threshold. So we have the entry threshold, and then we have the threshold of return. And so with that entry threshold, it is really the initiation into the new self, or the search for the new self, the quest for it. And with that point, it is this point of I like this quote from Hero with a Thousand Faces. He says, this popular motif, and he's talking about the crossing of the threshold, gives emphasis to the lesson that the passage of the threshold is a form of self-annihilation. Instead of passing outward beyond the confines of the visible world, the hero goes inward to be born again. And after the crossing of the threshold in his stages of the journey, then he has the belly of the whale, which is also a womb symbol, the symbol of going back into the womb, and then it's kind of the first stage of after we cross it. But I think that's a really interesting place to start, because we think of thresholds and we think of like, yay, we're going to be new. Isn't that great? And I really like this idea of remembering what this is ultimately about, is the passage of self-annihilation. Because the old does not function anymore once we enter the supernatural world. We have to become something different.
It's totally, again, perfectly aligned with our Plutonian astro weather that we're having at this moment, because, I mean, I'm seeing a lot of kind of celebratory posts on the internet and about like the Pluto ingress, and I want everyone to feel well.
Scared?
No, I want people to be okay, Mariana. I want everyone to be okay.
I don't.
I know. So
Wake up,
here's
people.
here's the Virgo Scorpio split. I'm like, be well. And you're like, be annihilated. But there is this annihilating quality to this change, to this threshold that we're on right now, as Pluto is literally, as we're filming this, poised at the last degree in the last minute of Capricorn, 29 degrees, 59 minutes. And what that does is like, it puts this heavy weight, and it is this pressure of like melting down and like burning away, and all of these alchemical images come through. And I think that there's something about the fact that we are all aware of a certain sense of stagnation and discomfort, and we're looking for change, and we forget that change comes after something really devastating often comes through and changes our perspective or opens a new door, right? So I think that not to say don't be excited for planetary change, because, you know, for example, as a Capricorn rising, I'm very ready to, you know, leave this part of my life in the past. And by the way, Pluto's going to come back into Capricorn for a couple of months later this year.
Right.
So we're not quite done yet. We're
Right.
kind of racing ahead
Right.
to the alchemical finish line here. But there is the element, I think, of Pluto as the one of those threshold guardians. And one of the symbols of Pluto is, a sort of phoenix imagery, right? We have the sort of self-immolation and the rebirth. We usually focus on the beautiful phoenix being reborn, but what you have to do first is put yourself on the pyre and burn away.
Yeah.
Like, that's heavy shit. So thinking about, Pluto too as this, lord of the underworld, there's also this idea that underworld journeys give us gifts, or they give us this sort of wisdom and insight, but you still have to get down into the underworld to do it.
Yeah.
Right. One more kind of image has come through, is like when you were talking about having a kind of guide or having a guardian or having somebody say, this is the way through. I was thinking immediately about the labyrinth myth, right, where Ariadne is holding the spool of thread for our hero, and that is called the clue. Like that, the actual spool is called the clue. And so the hero takes this thread through the labyrinth to find the center, slay the Minotaur, and then he has to follow the thread back out
That's so pretty.
into, right, the world. And so without the through line, without the clue, without the spool of thread from Ariadne, Theseus is not able to find his way back out. So it's not just about getting to the center of things and finding like an answer. It's also about putting the pieces back together and going back to your life with this changed perspective, I think. So yeah, I don't know.
I love that. That's so pretty. Did I ever tell you that that was supposed to be my name, Ariadne?
No, that's
Yeah.
crazy. Oh my
Isn't that
God.
good? That would have been
Your
good.
mother, your
I
Leo
know.
mother.
I
That's
know.
amazing.
My sister's
What changed your
Persephone.
mind?
My father
know.
didn't like it. He thought it was too
Why?
weird. She got Persephone, and I guess the second time around, he wanted me to be Christine.
We would have
She
been
wanted-
Christine and Cristina. We would have been enemies. That's so funny.
Yeah. But anyway, I think that this idea of like the following of the thread is extremely beautiful, and I also really want to hold, the tension of how scary and terrible it is to cross a threshold. This idea of self-annihilation, and we're in this Plutonian mindset right now for sure. But I think that when we cross a threshold in myth, one of the first things that happens is that we have to encounter the guardian of the threshold. And the guardian of the threshold is sometimes a beast, sometimes it's a sphinx, sometimes it's a trickster. It can appear in a lot of different forms. But the threshold guardian is always something that will annihilate us, will finish the annihilation. And the test of it, like how we get through it, is if we are willing enough to, like, we have enough commitment to the passage that we are willing to be tested and willing to go through the fray. And I think that that's ultimately what the purpose of the threshold is. It's the crossing into the new way of being, and the challenge of saying, do you even really want this? Are you willing to go through with it? And we don't always know that we want it, but it's not like we're sitting there going, I want to change, and so I'm doing this. Sometimes we're just changing. But there is an unconscious commitment to it. There's an unconscious part of us that's like, yes, this is where I have to go for whatever reason, and I'm going to follow it through. And so it's only by like preparing ourselves in that way and holding to it, because we will have to, look at ourselves in a new light. We're going to have to change, and we're going to have to be threatened. And if we approach the threshold and go like, wait a second, like, I'm not ready for this, or I don't really know what this is going to do for me, or who I'm going to be on the other side, we get too scared of the unknown, then the threshold guardian will determine that for us and pummel us and annihilate us, and we'll go crawling back to where we came from. And I think that that's a really, really important part of the threshold idea, is that we get to this line in the sand in the world where we look over the other side and it's pure shadow and it's pure
Mm-hmm.
darkness, and we have no idea what lays on the other side of it. And the challenge, of course, is like, do you have the courage to go find out?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have the desire to find out? Do you have
Mm-hmm.
the willpower to, and the faith to trust that you're going to survive the discovery? And
Yeah.
I think that we, as you said, like the way that we're treating this change with Pluto and everything is a really good, just kind of way. It summarizes like a lot of the way that we just handle things in general, especially in our spiritual community, where you know we're very interested in self-development, but we just do all of the like the spiritual bypassing with it, kind of thing of just, it's pretty, it's so pretty, isn't this pretty, we love a threshold.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, I don't know if we love a threshold.
Yeah. The
Thresholds are
threshold
rough.
requires surrender, and we're not surrendering to like comfort. We're surrendering to literal discomfort. We're surrendering
Yeah.
to fear. We're surrendering to the
Yeah.
unknown. And I think that in a bid to either like make good content, we make
Mm-hmm.
the unknown really sexy. And it's like, actually, if you, I mean, many of us have been through these trials by not just fire, but all the elements.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is a total loss of direction. It's disorienting. And, we do find we spend a lot of time looking for clues, and we spend a lot of time not knowing. And so
Yeah.
I think that one of the questions that I had going into this is thinking about how we define or how we even recognize when we're on a threshold moment. What does that look like and feel like? And so I have some very basic astrological ideas that I will talk about maybe later. But in terms of the emotional or psychological quality of feeling like you're poised at a threshold, I think that there is a lack of knowing. That is one of the primary signatures of finding ourselves at a threshold moment. And, you know, I think a lot, honestly, I think I've learned that from being your friend. I've had so many moments of not knowing and being like, what am I supposed to do in XYZ situation over the past several years? And you're just like, you don't have to know, you're at the threshold. And I think that that's super powerful. So everybody get yourself a friend like Mariana who can say that to you. But I want people to feel resourced in seeing when they're there themselves, because it can actually be really comforting to have that darkness be, an element of the change rather than something that scares us and freaks us out. So yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree, that we need to, something that we can do for ourselves is find the points where we're at the threshold and reorient ourselves to, just, I feel like a lot of times we're just moving through life and it's like the next thing, where are we now? What's going on next? And we don't always take the moment to pause and say, like, what does it feel like? Where does it feel like I am on the journey? This is one of the reasons I really like the tarot, because I like seeing in the tarot the reflection of that hero's journey in the cards and the sequence of the cards, both in the minor arcana and the major arcana. And I'll pull cards for myself, or I'll pull them for my clients, and I'll get a clue of like, you're at a threshold. Here we are, right? Like there's a signal that says this is the point in the cycle that you're at. I think that we can tell that we're at a threshold when we feel like we are neither who we were before and we're also not who we are next. And so the challenge is like, can we be present enough with that experience, inquisitive enough, curious enough about where it wants to take us, that we follow the thread and we be willing to get lost? I think that this is something that we have really lost in our contemporary society. Maybe this is another byproduct of empiricism. I don't know. We are totally unwilling to get lost in the world and in ourselves. And I do it, I am guilty of this so much. I hate being lost. I always want to grip onto some kind of stability. And it is only in being lost that we actually discover the thing. This is why I love the moon card so much, because, I think it's Sally Nichols, in her book, Jung and the Archetypal Journey, or it used to be called Jung and Tarot, she says that the moon card is the worst card of the deck. Like it's the darkest, most sinister card of the deck. And I absolutely hate that. Not only
Mm.
because I love the moon and she's my friend, um, but because like it's this idea that when we're in the darkness, when we're in the cloud of confusion, that there's nothing there but vipers and dangers and illusions, and there's nothing else to be found. And I think that we have the star moment in the tarot, which is so beautiful. And after the tower falls, number 16, we have number 17, which says there's a there's something that was truer all the time behind that tower, and take a look at the star and take that seriously. And then we know that at card 19 we're going to get to the sun, which is illumination and consciousness and putting all the pieces together, and feels very bright. We feel reborn in many ways. But the moon sits in between and it's very confusing. And I was confused by it for a long time because I was like, what is this card of like darkness and what is that doing here? And it occurred to me that once we experience the star and we experience a return to a light, it's a call. Essentially, the star is a call, right? Like we have the magi, they see the star in the distance and they say, I got to go follow that. So it is a threshold beacon in a way of saying, here, you got to go. And then with the moon, we actually, one of the most beautiful symbols in it is that we have the gates that we see in the
Mm-hmm.
depth card in the background. Now they're right in the front, they're right ahead of you, and so we know we've journeyed a long way already. We're right at the edge of this return threshold. I would say honestly, that's what it points to.
Mm-hmm.
And in this last stage, that's the point in which we have to get the most lost in the wisdom of the unconscious, the most lost, and be willing to be the most lost there, and have also the total faith that we will get to the other side. We'll cross through the threshold and then we'll get to the sun. And that's what we're trying to do. And so we can breathe again. But in the meantime, we have to not know where we're going, not be able to make things out. And all of our energy has to be given into what's true in the depths of my psyche, what's true in my feeling experience, what's true in my dream life, what's true in all these other aspects of me that I do not have conscious control of, and I feel really lost. But I think that that's part of the threshold. That's kind of the second half of the threshold of the return portion of it. But we have to get lost. We have to be lost, and we're scared to do that. We're scared to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
I find that very sad about, our culture in general, that we don't have the tools, we don't have the myths anymore to prepare us that says
Mm-hmm.
you're going to go be lost. It'll be fine. That's what all these old myths are about. They're all
Mm-hmm.
about being lost and trying to get back. But
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, all of that is beautiful and brilliant as usual. And I think it's so funny. I used to kind of bristle at the idea, and I still kind of do, that the moon card in the tarot has this darkness to it, because I just feel like, lunacy and lunar consciousness is often quite sexist, and
Yeah, it's
it's kind
demeaned.
of
Mm-hmm.
it's so we have to kind of revitalize that and say,
Yeah.
actually, it's a totally necessary piece of the path to individuation, and it's even
Mm-hmm.
represented here in that arc of the tarot. So yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
love all of that. And I think that talking about threshold guardians, the dogs mentioned in
Mm-hmm.
my symbols book show up
Mm-hmm.
in that. There's also that mention of scorpion men, and there is that, it's always like a crayfish or a lobster or something like
It's a
that.
crawfish or
Mm-hmm.
something. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
like our primordial self in this,
Yeah,
like,
so funny. Yeah,
yeah.
it's
The
great.
dog and the wolf are very interesting. I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Rachel Pollack who said this, but I really like this. Maybe it was also made in Sally Nichols. The idea of it's a dog and a wolf rather than two dogs. You
Yeah.
can kind of tell that it is, because one is domesticated and one is wild. And so
Yeah.
we're in between the tension of the two as well at the same
Inside of you
time.
are two wolves. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's great. Yeah, so the tension is there, and the kind of scary passage, I'm thinking of like forests and water, and isn't the first like line of Dante's Inferno, I took a walk in a dark wood, and
Yeah.
he gets
Yeah.
lost there and he winds up finding
Yeah.
his guide into hell. Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about forest and
Mm-hmm.
underworld stuff, because I
Yeah.
think that this is an interesting sort of caveat here. So, when we are at a threshold and we're looking for the way through, or we're looking for just the next step, we often have to find a guide, as we've been talking about. We need somebody to decode the next steps. We need a friend to hold the tension for us, or we need somebody who's been there before to kind of give us a hint or a clue about what it means to really approach that threshold. So in the Aeneid, the epic poem by Virgil, Aeneas, the hero, has to, part of his journey is that he, I think that he has a dream that he's supposed to go meet his father's ghost in the underworld. And he has a message for him about like the subsequent birth of Rome, right? So the whole epic is about how Rome is so amazing and, how the city came to be. But, it's an interesting thing. So I think he has a dream about his father, Anchises, and he's like, I'm supposed to go meet him. And in order to get to the underworld, he has to go find the Cumaean Sibyl, who is in Sicily. And so they sail over to Sicily, where the opening to the underworld is. This is a widely held belief that the opening to the underworld for the Romans was in Sicily. This is also where Pluto abducted Persephone. A lot of stuff went down in Sicily. So
Sicily's a magic place.
Yeah. So
it's also where Equalizer 3 happened.
Oh, wow. We were talking about Equalizer movies before we got on here. So you know what? We can do a whole
synchronicity.
That's very funny.
Sounds like it.
Oh, God.
Yeah, anyway.
I love it. No, I really want to go there.
We should go together.
That would be so great. Okay.
We should go together and find the entrance to the underworld and then say
get
bye.
Lost. And never
Hi,
return.
Everybody.
Anyway, and so Aeneas finds the Sibyl of Cumae, and she's like, yeah, you can go to the underworld, but you're not going to get through without me, and you're not going to get through without a couple of other things. So she instructs him to go to this particular, wood through a cave opening, and he has to find a tree that has a golden branch on it, the golden bough, which is like a famous symbol. And if you're worthy of passage into the underworld, you are going to be able to pull off that bough. And that's the offering that you actually have to bring to Persephone to get down into the depths and have be, a kind of symbol of your commitment to the journey that's ahead of you. So thinking about all of these ways in which we have to find a sense of commitment as well to that journey down to the katabasis moment, and find our golden bough, or find the kind of proof that we're really, really tied to and devoted to this exploration of the unknown, helps us navigate the threshold moment. So in real life terms, what does that look like? We're not all going to go out there and find a golden bough, but what does that feel like? It feels like looking for a kind of constant reminder to yourself that the discomfort that you're feeling at the threshold is real, and that the discomfort is holding wisdom that leads you somewhere else. I think is an important, way for us to use it in our real lives.
Totally. I think that's why we work in the modalities we do and why we teach modalities we do, because you'll be transformed because the threshold is waiting for you and you've gathered the tools that you might be able to use and need to help you survive the crossing and then the navigation through that other side of the world, the supernatural world. The supernatural world is symbolic of the inner world. That's what it is, in my opinion, really symbolizing, is that we cross the world of daily life, the mundane, right? The profane of this is what I do and this is the patterns I'm in and this is what I see as the boundaries of my life. We cross beneath into the world of the unconscious, into the world of inner feeling and inner discovery. And that's where we stay, and that's where we wander and we go through the journey, the most of the journey. And then we return. And so what we use, what we need, I really like the, bringing in the Aeneas, his quest for these tools, because we do need to prepare ourselves. And those things come to us, right? And they appear to us because they're right or because they're ready, so we get those little weird things, like randomly get that Instagram ad that you did not ever think about. And then you're like, oh my God, I really want to take that class, or I really want to look into this story or something. Those little invitations are all very useful. But when we make the passage, commitment is the foremost thing that we must have. and the acceptance of wandering, um, and the willingness to be lost and the willingness to be challenged. I think that this is where a lot of us fail. This is um, a problem, I think, of our society in general, is that we're all very, I mean, this is just human nature, so it's not like we're all shit because we are like this, but we're all very unwilling to let go of our ego identity, or ego, the idea of the ego, of who we are, and say, I really don't know. And so when we're invited to cross the threshold and we're invited to do all this work and face the challenges, we run away a lot. I actually think that we have a discomfort with crossing now because we're just so kind of glued to the patterns that we're in. I see this a lot with like students who come to me who are like, I want to build a business, so I want to do tarot or something, but I've tried this thing out on Instagram, or I've started a newsletter or whatever, and it's not working, right? And this in and of itself is a threshold, because it's an invitation to say, like, you don't quite know what's going on. You need to change. There's a call for you to figure out a new skill, a new side of yourself, a call to like challenge if this is what you really want. All these things are happening under the surface of you saying, I tried this thing and it didn't work, and now I'm feeling frustrated, and I'm feeling stuck. It is a threshold point of discovery of a new way, a new path. Mm-hmm. It feels very mundane, but there's a lot under the surface of it. And a lot of times the people just get stuck because they're like, but this is what, I know is supposed to work, or this is what other people have done, or this is, there's a rigidity which prevents change, and it prevents an actual crossing. And we cannot be rigid as we cross the threshold, because the first thing that's going to happen is that our line is going to bite us right in the face, and we're not going to be paying close enough attention to know when to dodge, or when to make a barter, or whatever it is that we need to do to make the crossing.
I think that that's so smart, because yes, like, we live in this moment of constant comparison with others, especially if we're people who are interested in having like a public presence. I think too, one thing that's important to remember is that although there is this kind of archetypal moment of the threshold, we all have a different kind of threshold to navigate, and we all need to find our own unique way through, even though symbolically, yes, things like surrender to shadow, or letting the ego be pliable might be constants on that journey. The way that you're going to navigate your threshold and I'm navigating mine will be quite different based on our own baggage, dispositions, and circumstances. So that's the other thing, is that there's no one size fits all approach. And that's something that we say a lot, I think, in our practices. I certainly say that a lot in astrology readings with people. It's like, there's no one way to do this. There's no one way to look at the chart and find the answer. There's no one way to understand yourself. So, yeah.
And something you're making me think of right now is like how unwilling we are, I feel like, publicly, to be crossing the threshold in the passage point of the threshold. It's like actually something that we are pretty embarrassed about, I think. One of the quotes I really like from Campbell, I have it up here. The familiar life horizon has been outgrown. The old concepts, ideals, and emotional patterns no longer fit. The time for the passing of a threshold is at hand. And I feel, whenever I get to one of those places where I'm like, the old life has been outgrown, I don't quite know what the new patterns must be. Whether that is something as simple as my presence on social media, how I show up, what does it look like, how do I curate it, to what do I want to offer? What do I want to say about these tools that I use and these tools that I teach, and changing things? I hit these thresholds. I know you do too, where it's like the old has been outgrown. It doesn't quite work. And so there is the middle way. There's this middle path that we have to take, this passage point, this threshold that we have to navigate. And it's messy. It's always messy, and it always looks chaotic, especially from the outside. Well, it feels more chaotic probably on the inside than it actually looks on the outside. And I think that it's so interesting that in our society, because we're all so public all the time, that there's this fear, I think a lot of us have, of it being like visible, that were in the passage. And that to me
Yeah.
is very, very sad.
I think it makes sense though if you think about a threshold, like it feels very interior and it feels very
Yeah.
private and
Yeah.
sacred, and like, it's almost like you're blindfolded but other people aren't. And
Yeah.
so I think that there is a sense of vulnerability that comes up as well with
Yeah.
admitting that you don't know what the F you're doing. And
Yeah.
I think that we're all always bumping up against these moments as well, even if it looks like somebody from the outside has figured their thing out and they've like mastered the algorithm and they know how to, show up in their business, or they have a perfect relationship, it seems, or they have like a great, whatever family life, or they're a published author. We're all always navigating these harder liminal moments because we're all continually growing and changing. It doesn't ever end. And so I think that
Yeah.
that's the other important thing, is that the symbolic loop of descent and return is something that is present in myths in every culture. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's not just one character that does it. It's many handfuls of them, and some of
Mm-hmm.
them survive, others don't.
Mm-hmm.
Persephone is able to figure out how to make friends with Shadow, and she becomes the queen of hell after being abducted to the underworld. Orpheus, though, is not able
He doesn't make
to
it.
save Eurydice, and she does not
Yeah.
get to cross the threshold again. So there
Yeah.
are all of these stories of having different orientation to
Yeah.
the threshold, and we have
Mm-hmm.
to take that as a metaphor for the ways that, so, like you said before, sometimes we shy away from the threshold. I've
Yeah.
definitely had moments where I'm like, I'm being tested and I don't have the strength for this right now, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to stick with that older version of self, and I'll meet the threshold later. And I
Yeah.
think that there's nothing wrong with that
No, no, we have
personally,
to
because
sometimes. Yeah.
yes, we can't
Yeah.
make ourselves crazy.
I think
Hmm.
the tarot shows us that too in the way that it ends. It ends in the suits of the cups and the pentacles with the success of crossing the threshold.
Right. Hmm.
And then in the suits of the swords and the wands, I think that we fail really to cross the
Hmm.
threshold back.
Yeah, I think that astrologically, the moments of threshold are often they're a little bit different than the tarot, because they
Mm-hmm.
are sometimes these rites of passage that are universal for everyone. So at certain ages, like in your Saturn return from
Right.
ages like 28 to 30, you're in
Right.
a threshold moment. In your early 40s, you have your Uranus opposition as well as your Pluto square. And so you're in this threshold moment, and we all have to navigate that. But I think that what's interesting about astrological thresholds is that for a lot of them, certainly the inner planets, um, we are offered multiple opportunities to do
Yeah.
the threshold. And
Yeah.
that's because, again, like I was saying, I have this image of like the cycle of the descent and the
Yeah.
return. And astrological time is cyclical, and it is going to kind of come back around and let you open the door again. So I think that from the vantage point of saying, yeah, sometimes we sort of fumble the passage across the threshold. In my view, in astrology, we do have an opportunity to kind of use the wisdom of that failure and apply that to what comes next.
And I really want to impress upon people that thresholds are beautiful. There's a reason why we're enchanted by the word, the threshold. It feels like something is possible. It feels
Yeah.
like on the other side, we will see the fantastical kingdom. We'll see the supernatural come into focus. We'll see all of the beautiful things that we couldn't imagine, yesterday really be right there on the precipice of actualization. And, I think that that is really ultimately what the threshold is. It's the crossing into the possible, because we know that the old self has been outgrown. And so we seek an expanded horizon.
Hmm.
And we do not get to just walk into it without being changed. And we do not actually experience being changed without passing the tests that confirm that change. So that is my 2 cents about loving the threshold and fearing it. Of course, we're going to be afraid, and we're not always going to survive it, because sometimes we think we're more ready than we are. sometimes we know we're not quite ready enough, and life, gives us the opportunity and maybe says, you could jump and you'll make it. You might make it. It'll be a hard landing, but you might. But it's okay also to say, I don't want to have a hard landing. I want to gather my tools first. I want to be more prepared, and that's okay too. But then you have to wait for the next time that the threshold appears before you. So it's patience too. But before we move on to a dream, do you have any final thoughts on thresholds and maybe thresholds around this Plutonian moment we're having?
Yeah, I think that there is a collective reveal of shadow that Pluto does, right? Pluto is, again, made very like sexy in like pop internet astrology, but Pluto is obsessed with revealing the dark underbelly of things and the rot that exists there.
Yeah.
And I think that, Pluto is about power and obsession and intensity and all of these things that we kind of hide and bury in our psyche that we keep in shadow and we say that's not something to be shared or that's not appropriate or that's whatever. And so I think that a lot of us right now are kind of coming face to face with what it is that we have pushed into shadow as the sun connected with Pluto over the past 24 hours. Whenever that happens, the planet that connects with the sun is being purified by the sun's light. That's what the Kazemi moment is.
Right.
And so it's a kind of, coming to awareness moment about what we're actually keeping in shadow. And not only all of that, but we've had Pluto in Capricorn for the past 16 years. And so every lesson of Pluto and Capricorn's time has now kind of been culminated or illuminated or shown to us in this particular way. So I think that if people are feeling wobbly at the threshold, I certainly woke up today and did not feel great. I was really looking forward to this to ground me because I felt strange. So if you're feeling that way, you're not alone. And I think that knowing that we're kind of at this place where we get to decide that what we've kept in shadow is actually really vitalizing and part of who we are, is an important thing to also embrace. So I think that's where I'm at with it. And maybe that feels helpful to some people.
It's helpful for me. So thank you. Let's go to, let's talk about a dream.
Okay, let's do it.
If you're enjoying this podcast, we encourage you to leave a review or learn more about how you can support us on Mighty Networks, where you can get access to some exciting exclusive offerings. Or you can connect with us by sharing a symbolic experience, whether from a dream or synchronicity, for us to explore on the show. Thank you to today's sharer, and please tell us your symbolic experience or connect with us on our website, sorormysticapodcast.com.
Are you a small business looking to reach a targeted audience of people interested in all things esoteric? If this sounds like you, Soror Mystica would love to invite you to become an ad partner. We offer a highly tailored audience of mindful, curious, depth-seeking listeners, and we would be delighted to showcase your business and offerings to new hearts and new minds. Simply fill out an advertiser application form at our website, linked in the show notes below, or navigate to sorormysticapodcast.com/advertise with us.
Jungian Online presents Jung Archademy, a personal growth learning platform for you. Join expert faculty, analysts, authors, and artists for live and video classes and events in the continuing tradition of Jungian psychology. Join us live or watch later. Our courses are accessible and presented in a way that everyone can follow and enjoy. Come together in search of meaning. Come explore jungarchademy.com. And as a recent addition to the faculty, I can't encourage you highly enough to go check out jungarchademy.com.
Okay, so today's dream is super, super interesting and deals with themes of doubling. So here we go. Our dreamer writes, I'm outside a building with E, and she asked me to write her story, but I can't write it freely because it has to be acceptable to her son, who has an authoritative, threatening presence. She also asks me what season it is. The leaves are green, so I reply spring or summer. inside the building on the second floor. I have to get out, but there are 2 barred gates stopping me. One is padlocked, but the other surprisingly isn't, and I open it. Outside again, I watch 2 men jump out of 2 second-floor windows. Their falls are broken by 2 wooden benches, but the benches break. The windows and benches are symmetrical, and the men are identical. E then asks me again what season it is. I see some yellowing leaves and say it's autumn. I sense her saying, "I told you so." Fantastic.
It's
Yeah.
such a good dream. This was shared by a member of our cloister community, and so we were discussing it a little bit over there, and we got permission to share it with everybody because it is just so many powerful archetypal themes there, themes of doubling, seasons changing, um, falls, and like
Doors and windows,
doors and
gates, like
windows,
thresholds.
thresholds.
Yeah.
Yes. So something that you said in the group in the cloister, you mentioned Castor and Pollux, and I thought that was really interesting. You want to tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, for sure. So when I think about twins, the first twin that I always, twin pairing I always think of is Castor and Pollux, who are the twins that the Gemini constellation are named after. And basically, to make their very long story compressed, they are twins, but one of them is mortal and the other one is immortal. And so they have all these adventures, and at a certain point in their adventuring, one of them is killed and the other one is immortal. So he survives this like kind of fight that they get into with other guys. And the immortal twin begs the gods to give his brother a piece of his immortality, so that he might survive and they can stay together. And to kind of put them out of their misery, Zeus just makes them into a constellation and grants them that peace. But when we hear this story, there is this kind of, it's not that twins are just identical and they're mirroring each other and there's like this two-ness to them, but twins or twinning to me always suggests this tension between life and death, mortal and immortal, sacred and profane, body and spirit, all of these different dualities that we carry in the symbolic realms. And so when I read this dream and there are 2 men jumping out of windows and stuff like that, I was curious about what that seemed to me to be like the crystallization of the tension of the doubling of things in this story of the 2 gates and the 2 benches and, even
the second floor.
The second floor. And also she's delivering the seasons in these pairings of 2, spring or summer or fall or winter. So I don't know. I felt very curious about that. So that was my first crack at offering something here.
Something that was really interesting to me about it, though, is that they both jump, they both land, and they both break the bench. And I guess the bench symbolically is like, a place of sitting in between, rest. And we would hope that they would land on the bench and maybe the bench would break their fall in some way or offer some safe place to land. They both break through it and destroy the safety. So it's not like one of them kind of has a landing and the other one doesn't, which is interesting to me. So they both fail in the same way. But there is change in the dream. So while that looks like there's no like nothing changes or there's not one thing that works and another thing that doesn't, there is literal change. We move from spring to autumn in the span of the dream, which symbolically, of course, is like growth and new birth and new life to destruction and the end of life and the passing into the dark. And those 2 points of the seasons are threshold points of the seasons, obviously, because we're crossing the threshold into the new possibility of life and crossing the threshold into the underworld side of things. So I find that extremely fascinating that occurs in the space of this dream, really rapidly.
Yeah. The way in which change and doubling are kind of co-present here, it feels very mutable to me. And so again, that kind of like Gemini energy or the end of a season energy as a threshold moment is here. But I think what's also curious is that at the beginning, she's being asked to write a story, which I also associate with Mercury, who is a threshold figure that we actually didn't even talk
Yeah,
about.
we didn't even get to Mercury. Sorry,
We didn't
Mercury.
even, sorry, Mercury, we love you, right? So he's the guardian of the threshold in many ways, and also the god of writing. And so, am I right? Is Thoth the underworld god and also the writing god for the Egyptians? He's both of them.
I
I
don't know,
think
but it sounds right to me. He is the Egyptian equivalent of Mercury.
that he
They're
is
very
writing
similar.
and
He's also,
the
yeah,
underworld.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
think that when we're working with dreams, and this is just a general idea, it is so easy to overlook some of the smallest details because they feel irrelevant. And this is a really good example of don't overlook the smallest details because they're weird or they seem irrelevant. The fact that in the beginning of the dream, there's this like invitation, write a story, write something. But then the dreamer is uncomfortable with that because this person that they know, their son, is watching this and being judgmental, or it has this very authoritarian presence. So there's some kind of like almost like a Saturnine energy to it too,
Mm-hmm.
of being
Mm-hmm.
like, you have to do it correctly,
Forbidding.
or
Mm-hmm.
yes. And so there's this reluctance to allow what we would think of as the libido energy, the life force energy, the creative energy to flow at will. But yeah, there's this kind of stopping of the energy and the stopping of the possibility, that then, but we're in the spring moment, and then in this next point of the dream we have these two guys kind of like jump out windows. What's unclear is why they're jumping out the windows. Is there like some kind of a danger or something? I'm assuming so.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're trying to escape, and they crash, and they don't land properly. I had a dream. I shared this on the cloister page as well recently, where I was taken in this group tour or something to this ancient temple of a goddess, and there was so many beautiful things in there, crystals and roses, and I was like, oh, what a luscious, beautiful feminine dream, and I loved it. And in the last scene of the dream, I had to make an offering to the goddess, and I gave her orange soda flavored chapstick. And it was so silly that I brought it to my analyst, and I was thinking about the dream, and I shared it on the cloister page, and I was like, this is the point. This is the part I just want to leave out. Like, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. It is dumb. It makes no sense. Why would I offer that? I have better things to offer. And of course, in like sitting with that for a while and bringing it into analysis, it was like one of the most important points of the dream, if
Yeah.
not the most important point, because it was so strikingly different and strange. And so anyway, that's my little like speech on don't let go of the things that feel like, that's just kind of weird and doesn't quite make sense to me, so I'm just going to leave that out. Take it
Mm-hmm.
seriously because there's a reason it's there. And I think in this case, although we're not going to get to the bottom of this dream, certainly I think the key to it is the task given to the dreamer at the very
Mm-hmm.
beginning.
I agree.
This
I
is your
completely
quest
agree.
begins here, write this story. And then you can't, for some reason, there's this person watching you who says, are you going to do it correctly? It's like a symbol of the superego. This is what we would kind of think of in Freudian
Yes.
psychology, of the superego is watching you. Are you going to do it? And it constricts the libido energy from flowing at will. And then that kind of, after that, things sort of start falling apart and breaking down, and it's all very weird. And then all of a sudden it's winter or it's fall.
Mm-hmm.
And the point where we could grow and develop and have this bountiful kind of period is now suddenly over. And that to me is interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that it's funny because we don't come back to that, like the
The task.
the task to write doesn't come
Yeah.
back up again, and so the parts of the dream that are a little bit spookier, like people falling out of windows or something like that, you kind of can get fixated on. But I do think that it's one of the clearest messages of the
Yeah.
dream at the
Yeah.
beginning. So what does it take to get past that sort of stern Saturnian figure? Does it take pushing through a threshold, throwing
Yeah.
oneself from a metaphorical window? And
Mm-hmm.
I think that the falls are broken, and that doesn't mean, that's I think a good thing. That says
Yeah.
that the fall, the descent is actually something that has like not a very comfortable cushion, but something that will
Yeah.
catch you at the bottom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's just like tension and duality all throughout this dream. And it's kind of like you can stay put, or you can let yourself be moved into a different kind of era, a different season of life.
Yeah, I think, I like that a lot. The allowance of being moved into a different season of life, that the season of life has shifted. I wish that we could think about this dream for like hours, because it really caught my attention. I was like, whoa, we got some symbols here. But I think we've done a good job of kind of breaking apart some of these key symbols, and then, just offering how to do a little bit of this work of just thinking of, I really like that we brought in, Castor and Pollux and this mythological element, and then, all the ideas of the mutable nature of the dream connecting to that side of the personality. I think it's really, really pretty. It's really beautiful. So
yeah, thank you, dear dreamer, for sharing this with us.
Thank you. All right. So go do Christina's class. Go learn about prophetic asteroids and make your astrology skills so sharp and brilliant that you impress everybody all the time, just like I'm impressed by Cristina all the time, and learn from her. And I think that's all we got for you today.
Yep, that's
survive
it.
Survive the change with Pluto. Get through it.
Yes.
Survive the threshold. We'll see ya. Thank you for joining us in our conversation today.
Please consider supporting the podcast by leaving a review and following Soror Mystica wherever you listen.
You can also become a more active supporter and a member of the Soror Mystica community by joining us on our Mighty Networks platform.
If you have a symbolic experience that you'd like to share with us for the podcast, you can tell us all about it at sorormysticapodcast.com.
The music for this podcast is written and performed by me, Mariana Lewis, with special thanks to Stefan Lewis. You can connect with both Cristina and myself on Instagram and get to know our work by clicking on the links in the show notes.
As the alchemical motto goes, as above, so below, as within, so without.
May this ancient wisdom continue to guide you deeper.
Until next time, take good care.